Welcome to Now We're Getting Somewhere. I'm Katie, and I'm a certified life coach, but I've also been a management consultant at McKinsey and a product manager at a tech startup. In other words, I know what it feels like to have a life that looks pretty good on paper, but doesn't feel as good as I want it to. I help my professional clients develop lives that are more meaningful, happy, and also more successful. And I want to share the same practical insights with you. Let's go. Hey team. Okay, I first of all have to start this podcast by naming that I sat down and started to record this podcast a few minutes ago, and just a couple of minutes in, I looked out the window and my office faces the front of our house in the street, and our nanny had been coming up our pretty steep driveway with one of my sons who's out of school this week, and suddenly they were out of view. They had gone into the side of the house, and then suddenly I see the stroller streaming down the driveway and going across the street. And I was like, oh my gosh, what happened? So I stopped the recording and ran out. Turns out totally fine. She thought she locked it, but she didn't. And she chose to hold on to my son, who sometimes has balance issues, rather than hold on to the stroller. I mean, that was an excellent prioritization if I ever heard one, but it was just really funny that I was in the middle of recording a podcast episode and I was like, wow, the stroller has gone across the street and down our driveway really fast. So anyway, that's how I'm arriving today. I am coming today with a little short and sweet podcast for you. I'm recording this on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, but you'll get it after Thanksgiving when we will be in the full-fledged holiday season. I hope you had a great Thanksgiving, however it went, if that's something you celebrate. My plan is to go up to my grandma's house in Central California. My grandma passed away about 1.5 years ago, but for really my whole life, the whole family on that side of the family, my mom's side, would gather at her house in this really adorable, sleepy town on the central coast of California. It's just so beautiful, and it's always kind of breezy yet sunny up there. It's just so lovely. And my cousin and I, for as long as I can remember, take these long, sprawling morning walks where we just talk about our whole lives. And I'm just really looking forward to it. And it is a lot to schlep my children to new places, to take care of them in new places, but I'm also still really looking forward to it. So I hope that your Thanksgiving was what you hoped it would be, whether that was restful or exciting, whether that was alone or in community. I hope it was what you wished. So today, as we enter the holiday season, I wanted to offer you an idea that has been really resonating with me in my life. And whenever I have been offering this idea to clients, I've offered it to a couple of clients recently, they always are like, what? Yes. So it's small, it's simple, and I thought maybe it's what we all need to get through the end of the year, this holiday season. The idea is this: take the next day off. Take the next day off. And you might think that I'm referring to limiting your indulgences with this take the next day off idea. Don't eat cookies for 2 days in a row. Take the next day off of cookies. But actually, I mean the opposite. So to give an example, if you were trying to make an improvement to your diet or how to relate to screens or to your exercise or something else, do it for just 1 day and then take the next day off. In other words, don't do it for 2 days in a row. I considered titling this episode of the podcast, Don't Do It for 2 days in a row, but take the next day off seemed at least somewhat shorter. So that's what I went with. And then once you've taken that next day off, if you want to do that positive thing, that thing that would serve you again, great. But do it for another single day and then take the next day off, and so on. On one hand, it's not like I've come up with a radical new theorem of physics. This idea, do it 1 day and then take the next day off, it might sound kind of obvious, but until recently, this was not something that I necessarily did very often or thought of particularly often. I more often tried to pick a very moderate practice, maybe a very doable practice, and try to do it daily, every day. I didn't necessarily think of just doing something for 1 day and then taking the next day off, or maybe the next several days off. So for the rest of this podcast, I just wanted to share how I've been applying it and how my clients have been applying it in case this is the nudge or the perspective shift that you need. For me, I actually came upon this idea because I have been wanting to make a couple of changes or implement a couple of new practices when it comes to my diet and my relationship with the internet recently, so I could rest more effectively. I'm sure I will talk more about this journey that I'm on once I kind of process the whole thing and have some more final results. But high level, I've been wanting to rest more deeply, and there were a few very moderate practices that I felt intuitively would help me do that. Like I said, these were pretty moderate, pretty reasonable things to do, but still, I just could not freaking get myself to do them. And I kept thinking to myself, Katie, these are very doable. They would totally serve you. Why can't you freaking do it? And I frankly banged my head against that wall for a while. And then I was finally like, you know what? Let's just do it for one day. We're just going to do it for one 24-hour day, and then we're going to stop. We're going to rest and regroup for as long as we need to before trying it again. And that is what I did. And it turned out that for me, it was hard to do these things, even these, just very small number of simple practices for a whole 24-hour day. I had feelings, I had thoughts. It was agitating. And simultaneously, I could definitely tell that they were serving me. It was helping me rest better, which was my goal. But it took emotional energy to do that. And the thing that helped me the most during that time, the thing that got me through it, was saying to myself, we're just doing this for one day. Just today. Tomorrow, we are not going to do this. And that is what I did. I did it for one day. And then I took a break. And that first time, my break was actually for a few days. And then a few days later, I picked up those same practices again. And I did those very moderate practices for just one day again. And again, it felt like they really did serve me. They really did help me rest more deeply, which is what I was trying to do. But also it took a little bit of emotional energy to do them. And again, I felt some feelings and some body sensations and some thoughts as the day moved forward. And again, I told myself, we're just doing this for today. Tomorrow, we're not going to do this. And then I honored that and I took a break for a few days again. And honestly, it was great because look, there were times on those kind of on days, I actually called them rest days because I was doing those practices, as I said, to try to rest more effectively, when, I didn't eat a thing that I might have otherwise eaten, or I didn't use a screen in a certain way that I was wanting to use a screen. I said no to some desires that I had, but also it felt pretty doable because I kept saying to myself, we're going to have it tomorrow. You can go hog wild tomorrow if you want. And knowing that all I had to do was wait until tomorrow, it really helped. And also even one day helped. One day of those practices, even if it just seems like a drop in the bucket, it helped. It gave me a bunch of data about myself, and I noticed some pretty measurable differences on a couple of key metrics that I was tracking for myself. And just to give you a sense of my personal trajectory, though, as I said, this is still very much in progress for me. After a couple of cycles, I found that I didn't need as many kind of days off in a row. I was able to do kind of like one day on and then one day off. But I still really liked knowing that off day, I call them pleasure days, was coming. And it was coming really soon. It was coming tomorrow. And I did that cycle, like one day on, one day off for a while, for as long as I needed to. I let myself really enjoy those off days, those pleasure days. And now in my current form, I find that I'm doing my my kind of like rest days where I'm kind of on these more positive practices that would serve me for 2 days on, and then I take a day off. But I really found for me that even the one day on, one day off was such a huge improvement on so many levels. So it's more just like, it seems to make sense. I'm feeling so much better that I kind of want to be on for 2 days in a row. And if I ever didn't, I would just go back to the one day on, one day off. And recently I've had a couple of clients who were trying to implement some new practices that would serve them, but they were also feeling some resistance. And we were playing with a bunch of options on our coaching calls. How could they make it really doable for themselves? And at some point in that conversation, I kind of threw out there, well, what if you didn't do it every day? You just did it one day and then you took the next day off or the next several days off, and you just never did it more than one day at a time. And visibly, for several different clients, once I said that, it would be like their shoulders dropped and their faces like lit up like, wait, I don't have to do it every day? It's funny. It was just like with me. It also hadn't occurred to them that not every day was on the table. And just like for me, as they implemented this, they typically kept it very doable, very loose at first. If they just needed kind of one on day for that new practice and then a bunch of days off, like 4 days off, no problem. They just started. They did one day and then they took off as many days as they needed to. And just to be clear, again, it wasn't like they were implementing really extreme practices like, all right, I'm going to eat 1,000 calories for one day and then I'm going to need a break. This was for really moderate things like eating, 5 servings of fruits and vegetables or getting a walk in, things that in our minds we do think that we can do every day, but sometimes that's too much. I really think that even these things can be hard to get started on if you haven't started them yet. They can be a lot harder than we want them to be. So I'm just here on this podcast to say, hey, maybe there is some practice that you are wanting to do, like limiting sugar or alcohol, or packing a lunch for work, or making a homemade dinner, or getting a walk in, or staying off of Instagram after dinner. Maybe just do it for one day, then take a break and go back to doing things how you were before, and then take that break for as long as you need to. And then maybe do one more day and then take another break. And maybe for all of December, you never do it for 2 days in a row. You always take the next day off. But hey, you're doing it more than you otherwise would have. You are starting. And maybe it's easier to do it for a day knowing that you can totally let it go the next day. If I'm honest, even talking about it, this idea feels really welcoming to me. It feels soft and spacious. So I hope you will apply it from that perspective during a time of year that often has a lot going on. And at least for me, it can sometimes feel really hard to take care of yourself in the holidays. Like we have to wait for January 1st to do anything that would really serve us beyond drinking a lot of alcohol and eating a lot of sugar and socializing a lot. But what if you could implement some things that would serve you, but you didn't have to do it for 2 days in a row? What if you could just do it for one day and take the next day off? Again, this isn't radical, but I'm hoping it's a reminder that some of us needed. Honestly, it's a reminder that I needed. And as always, everybody, I am rooting for you in the week ahead and the month ahead. You've got this. If you really want to change in a meaningful, lasting way, that's when you need a life coach. Every client I've worked with has had incredibly personalized reasons why they're in the tired or anxious or stuck or uninspired state they're in. Working with me can help you identify those roadblocks, which are usually blind spots that you genuinely cannot see, and implement a profoundly customized, doable plan for overcoming them. I have a very small, high-end, one-on-one coaching practice. If you'd like to be my next client, reach out at katiesiever.com. I'd love to meet you.